Welcome to Lingua Latina Tutorials with Mr. K, Pensum D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 37 of the Lingua Latina series. It is meant to accompany the Latine Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensum D worksheets available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. So let's get into the text and see the new syntax in Chapter 37. The first sentence I want to look at is here we'll look at line 16, starting with sola in regia erat filia nomina Lavinia iam matura viro. So there was one daughter in the palace named Lavinia, now ready for a husband. Matura viro. Matura, from matura saum, which just means ready or prepared, and then takes the dative here, viro. So remember that vir is one of those second declension nouns that starts, its nominative ends in R, so vir, but then follows the regular second declension pattern like servus. The next feature I want to point out is in line 21. We'll start here with equus Trojanus, dum Latinus in Italia in pacta diuturna regnat Troia seu ilium clarissima Asiae urbs, post bellum decem annorum tandem a Graecis capta est. So the Trojan horse. While King Latinus was ruling in Italy during a long period of peace, Troy, or Ilium, if you will, a very famous city of Asia, at last was, after 10 years of war, was captured by the Greeks. So the feature I want to point out here is the use of the present tense regnat, from regnare, to rule. This is just third person singular, present indicative active, with dum, but I translated it as past tense because the rest of the sentence is past tense. The city was captured. So, and this is a historical event, so dum, while King Latinus ruled in Italy in a long period of peace. But why? So why is this present? Dum, the word dum, while, in Latin, most frequently will take a present tense verb. Even though we'll translate it as past, it takes kind of a historical present, which we'll see more of that in this chapter. A present tense that gives more vividness to the description. And just be aware when you write sentences with dum that you want usually to use the present tense with it. And line 23 and 24, we have Graeci enim cum urbem vi expugnare non possent dolo usi sunt. So for the Greeks, when they weren't able to destroy the city by force, they used a trick. So the new feature here is we've got the subjunctive of possum with possent, our imperfect subjunctive. So why do we have imperfect subjunctive here? We're in a cum clause. And so what kind of cum clause? We're going to learn in this chapter some other forms of cum clauses. And you need to be able to recognize the differences mainly between those that take the subjunctive, like this kind, cum possent, and the kind that take the indicative. There are two that take the subjunctive, and there are three that take an indicative verb. So this this kind of a cum clause is a cum causal. We call it causal because it has there's a logical connection. It means more like since or because. So for the Greeks, because they weren't able to destroy the city by force, so rather than when, a pure temporal sense. So we'll call this cum causal. Understand it means since or because. In line 34, we have sed ubi primum equum ligneum in littora collocatum viderunt, stupentes constaterunt et molem equi mirabantur. So we have, but when first they saw the wooden horse placed on the shore, being shocked, they decided, or they stood there shocked and were marveling at the size of the horse. This ubi primum idiom here, with viderunt, the perfect tense, when you see when first they saw the wooden horse on the shore, when you have ubi plus perfect, it's often best to translate it as postquam, or after. And so in this context, but after they saw the wooden horse placed on the shore, they stood there shocked and were marveling. So you'll see this also for ut later in the chapter, that ut plus the perfect means after. In line 37, we have, we'll start with 36, al ut donum Minervae deae Troianis benignae sacratum intra muros duci et in arce locari iubebant, alii donum Graecorum suspectum in mare precipitandum et flammis urendum esse consebant, etc. It goes on. So we have alii, 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 some and others as our basic structure of the sentence here. So we have as our subject. So some were ordering is our main verb. So some were ordering that this is the horse. Some were ordering that it was a gift to Minerva, the kind or good goddess of the Trojans, was sacred. That it was sacred to Minerva. The sacred gift should be led within the walls and placed in the citadel. So we have here the new feature is benignae deae Troianis. So what case do we have here for Troianis? We have the dative case. And why do we have dative? It's because we have the goddess kind to the Trojans. It's an adjective that takes a dative, kind to these people. We saw that like with matura viro, ready for a husband, kind to the Trojans. The next new feature is in line 41. And we have itta dum populus incertus in contrarias sententias dividetur la aquan Neptuni sacerdos ab summa arce decurrens cive suos monuit ne danais confiderent. So we have thus while the people uncertain what to do, are divided into different opinions, Laocoon, the priest of Neptune, running down from the top of the citadel, warned his citizens not to trust the Greeks. So what dividetur here is divided. It's third person singular, present indicative passive, speaking about a past event. So thus while the uncertain people are divided, or uncertain people are divided into different opinions, well, we would translate this as a past tense in normal English idiom. When we're talking about we're doing storytelling, we usually use past rather than this vivid present tense, historic present. So remember that with a doom clause, like here where you have a storytelling doom, thus while the people uncertain are divided, we're going to translate it as past. So while the people uncertain were divided into different opinions, Laocoon, the priest of Neptune, running down, did these things. In line 46, we have, this is Laocoon warning the people. He says, Aut ula putatis dona carrera dolis danaum? Or do you think that ula dona, any gifts of the Greeks, carrera dolis, lack tricks? Do the gifts lack tricks? Carrera, to lack or to be without, takes an ablative of separation, which is what you get here. To be without, to be lacking, the ablative. In line 56, we have cum terram at tegissent, capitibus erectis oculisque ardentibus Troianos perterritus prospiciunt. So when they had reached the land, with their heads held up and with their eyes burning, they look out on the terrified Trojans. Here's another example of a present tense verb, prospiciunt, being used in storytelling, kind of like a doom clause. We see doom up here above. While he is sacrificing, we translate the immolat as past tense, while Laocoon was sacrificing a bull on the altar. Here we have when they had reached the land. We do have here with atigissent the pluperfect, a pluperfect subjunctive, third person plural, and we've got that in a cum clause. This is a cum narrative clause or storytelling clause. But so in subordinate clauses like this, the verbs tend to stay in the past tense, like with cum or qui clauses, but the other verbs in the storytelling will be in the present, like prospiciunt, even though they're telling about past events. So when they had reached the land, with their heads held up and their eyes burning, they looked out. We're going to translate that as the past. They looked out on the terrified, looked forward on the terrified Trojans. Okay, the next new feature is in line 61. And so here we have Iam bis corpus eius medium amplectuntur, bis collo longa corpora sua circumdant. So now they wrap themselves around the middle of his body twice, bis. And they wrap their bodies around, their long bodies around his neck twice. So we've got here with collo an example of a dative with a special verb, circumdant. Circumdant takes the dative. It also takes an accusative, so it takes two objects. They encircle, the thing that they're actually using to encircle is in the accusative here, their bodies. They encircle their bodies to his neck. We would say around his neck. So the first part of this compound verb, the circum, really is what's taking this dative object. They wrap around his neck. The next new feature, in line 60, we need to go back here also because Wenievat is an example of another a past tense verb. Wenievat, he was coming, or qui Wenievat, who was coming to help his wretched sons. This is talking about Laocoon. So Wenievat even though we have present tense verbs around it, corripiunt, they seized or they grab hold of him, then they grab hold of the father himself, who was coming to bring help. Just remember that in these qui clauses, instead of keeping things in the present, like qui venit, who is coming to bring help to his sons, the subordinate clauses tend to be in the keep their past tense verbs. The next new feature is in line 68. And so here we have tum vero cuncti Trojani novo pavore perturbantur et la oco untem poenas meritas minervae dedisse dicunt quod hasta scelerata sacrum robur laeseret. So but then all of the Trojans were bothered or disturbed with a new kind of a fear, and they say that Laocoon gave the deserved penalties to Minerva. We would say paid the deserved penalty to Minerva, but notice how literally it's constructed, that they gave the deserved penalties, plural, to Minerva. Minerva here is in the dative case. It's an object of this idiom, to pay the penalty to Minerva, poinas Minervae. The next new feature is in line 72. So here we have ergo parte murorum destructa machina illa hostibus armatis plena magno labore in urbem trahitur funibus, etc. So we have, therefore, with part of the walls destroyed, that war machine, that's the horse, filled up or full of armed enemies, was dragged into the city with ropes, with a lot of with hard work, magno labore, while the boys and the girls are singing and being happy, etc. So here the new feature, or the feature I want to point out, is the ablative with plena. We have plena hostibus armatis, full of, we would say full of armed enemies. And plena can take the genitive, but it also can take the ablative, as it does here. Filled up with, we would say, filled up with armed enemies. The next new feature is in line 83. And we have cum iam sol occidisset et nox obscura terram tegeret, Trojani feci somno se dederunt. So while when the sun had already set and dark night was covering the earth, the tired Trojans gave themselves to sleep. So here we have occidisset, which is the third person singular pluperfect subjunctive from occidere to set. This why do we have a pluperfect subjunctive here? We have subjunctive because we're in a cum clause. What kind of a cum clause are we in? We're in a cum clause which is called the cum narrative clause. Cum narrative means that several things are happening in our story at the same time. So while this thing is happening, something else is going on that's kind of connected to it. So when the sun had already set and dark night was covering the earth, and connected to that is that the tired Trojans gave themselves to rest because it's now nighttime. So cum narrative. So before we saw cum causal, so when it means since or because, and now in a cum narrative clause we see that when two things are happening in our story at the same time, we use a subjunctive with it as well. So the next new feature is in line 91. Go ahead to 91. And here we have, we'll start with 90. Dum haec aguntur Trojani sine cura dormiebant, en iis Aeneas dux egregius Anchisa et Venera dea natus. So while these things are happening, the Trojans were sleeping. So we're going to historic present. So let's go in the past tense. While these things were happening, the Trojans, without a care, were sleeping. Among them was Aeneas, a famous leader, born from his father Anchises and the goddess Venus. So here we have Anchisa, an ablative singular, ablative of separation here with the verb or the participle natus, having been born from Anchises. And again, Venere is also an ablative of separation, the goddess Venus. Also, I need to point out here that Anchisa, this ablative singular from Anchises, is slightly irregular because it's from a Greek name. And so if we were going to decline Anchises in the nominative, the accusative is Anchisen, as you see here. So Anchises, Anchisen, and then it follows the first declension for the rest of the way. So we have Anchisai, Anchisai, and then and the ablative we have Anchisa with a long A. Our next new feature is in line 99. And here we have Hu fugenat tedea te quis ait e repeflamis. So, alas, run away, flee, you who were born of a goddess, and snatch yourself out of these flames, she says. So here, what we have, Dea, just like we saw above, born from a goddess, in line 91. We have here the vocative from that that participle of natus, you born. Remember that second declension nouns like Marcus, when we are addressing that person, we use a short E. So you born from a goddess, the ablative of separation here with Dea. In line 150 and 151, we have Rex priamus senex ut primum fores fractas et hostes in mediis aedibus vidit manibus infirmis arma capit et gladio cingitur atque moriturus et in hostes progreditur. So King Priam, the old man King Priam, as he saw, as he first saw the doors broken and the enemies in the middle of the temple, or in the middle of his, here it's going to be in the middle of his house, he grabs weapons with his weak hands and is girded with a sword and about to die, sets out against the enemies. A couple of things to point out here. A bunch of historic presents. So in our translation, if we're going to do a translation of this, we want to put these into the past tense. So the old man King Priam, after he first saw that the doors were broken and the enemies were in the middle of his house, with weak hands, he grabbed hold of his weapons and girded himself with his sword, etc. So we're going to put those into the past tense, even though they're present, because they're historic presents. The other feature I want to point out here is that we have, as we saw before with ubi and the perfect, from here we have the perfect of videre, to see. So, at ut primum vidit, as first he saw, but in idiomatic English, in normal English, we would say after he saw. After he saw that the doors were broken, etc. In line 156, we have, start with iam. Iam non telis egemus, sed auxilio deorum. So now we don't lack weapons, we're not missing weapons, but what we're missing is the auxilio deorum, the help of the gods. Egemus, to go without or to be without, to need or to lack, it means the same basically as carrera. Like carrera, also takes an ablative of separation. So we're not separated from weapons. We're not missing or going without weapons right now. We're going without the help of the gods. And the next new feature is in line 159. We have huc tandem concede haegara tuebetur omnes aut moriere simul. So just come here. This altar will watch over all of us, or moriere simul, you will die at the same time. Moriere is not an infinitive. It looks like a second conjugation infinitive, but it's not. It's from the deponent mori, to die. And so what this is actually a contracted form of morieris. You will die, the second person singular future indicative deponent verb. So and then you see that in the margin that it's moriere is short for morieris. So if you're going to conjugate fully this future deponent here, future indicative deponent, we would have moriar, I will die. Morieris, which is contracted here as moriera, you will die. Morietur, moriemur, moriemini, and morientur, they will die. The next new feature is in line 193. And let's move ahead to 193. And here we have ubiam ad antiquam domum patriam pervenit, anchises pater, quem primum in altos montes portare volebat, ex patria capta fugere recusavit. So here we have another example of an ubi plus a perfect. Remember that ubi plus the perfect, we're going to translate as after. So ubi iam pervenit. After he came to his father's ancient home, his father Anchises, whom he wanted first to carry into the high mountains, refused to flee from his captured fatherland. So ubi plus the perfect is going to be translated as after this thing happened. And you see that in the margin, post quam. The next new feature is in line 198. And here we have nolo urbi captae superesse. And this is Anchises speaking. He says, I don't want to outlive the city after it's been captured. Or I don't want to outlive the captured city. Urbi captae is a dative case, a combination of a dative noun and adjective, or a participle here. Why is it dative? It's with this compound verb superesse, to survive or to outlive, and this takes the dative case. In line 204, we have, we'll start with meneputas, inquite relicto pedems hinc effere posse. Do you think that I'm able to pedem effere, to leave here with you left behind, while you're left behind? The new feature here is, oh, that's not the, sorry, I did the wrong line. What I want to do is actually with si tibi. Si tibi certum est Troiae periturae te tuosque adera patetiano morti. Here we go. So if it's certain to you that you want to add yourself and your relatives to the destruction of Troy, the door to death, the door of death lies open to you. So here we have tibi, a dative case from to tibi te te. So if it is certain to you, we would say if you are certain that you want to add yourself and others, etc. So this idiom, si certum tibi, is a it takes the dative. It's the dative case with certum. In line 219, we have. We'll start with Talia, I guess. Talia exclamans omnem domum gemitu complebat, cum subito mirabile prodigium visum est. So shouting out such things, he was filling the whole house with his groaning, when suddenly, so this is a change of fate. Something's this is not a connected idea. It's and what we call an adversative idea. When suddenly an amazing omen was seen, or prodigy was seen. So here we have a cum clause with an indicative verb, cum visum est, when suddenly this was seen. We have a special name for this kind of a cum clause with the indicative, and that is a cum adversative clause. Often it'll have something like subito, suddenly, or it shows some kind of a change from the original idea, tamen, or something like that. And so now would be a good time to quickly review the 5 different kinds of cum clauses that we've seen. The first 2 were subjunctive cum clauses. Cum causal, the one where you translate it as since this thing happened, then something, they made some other decision. We saw that earlier. And then the other one was cum narrative, and that's the storytelling cum. Storytelling cum just means when one thing happens and another thing happens at the same time or before it in the past. It's in a story format. That's cum narrative. Both of those take subjunctive verbs. But then there are 3 other kinds of cums that do not take subjunctives, that take indicatives. One of them is this one, where you have a change of fortune, and that's called cum adversative, and that one takes the indicative. Then there's the cum iterative, which means something goes on and on and on. So you could translate, whenever I do this, whenever I eat breakfast, I have eggs. That kind of a cum takes the indicative. And then also cum temporal, when it's just a one-time event. Not 2 events happening at the same time in the past, but just a one-time event. Then you're going to have an indicative with that cum. In line, okay, so those are all your cums to review. In line 233, we have, it'll start with ipse te portavo, nec mihi grave erit, hoc onus. So I will carry him myself, nor will this burden be heavy to me. So here we have grave from gravis. This is our neuter form of the adjective, because onus, a burden or a weight, is a neuter noun. So what we have grave with mihi, a dative case pronoun. The reason we have the dative here is that gravis takes the dative, heavy to me, kind of like you saw before with matura viro, ready for a husband. In line 238, we start with neque en mihi fas est res sacras tangere priusquam manus caede cruentas flumina vivo lauvero. So he says, for it isn't permitted to me, neque en mihi fas, it's not right for me to touch sacred things before I have washed my hands bloody with death or with murder in a rushing water or flowing water. So phos is the new feature I want to point out here. Phos is an indeclinable neuter noun. So it's going to be neuter, but it is you can't. It's going to be the same in the nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, and ablative cases, singular and plural. It means it religiously permitted. You could just translate it as right, for it's not right for me to do this, but understand that it's not religiously right for me to do this. That's what phos means. In line 247, we have, let's start with, we could just start with nunc omnis aura, omnis sonus teret, cum pariter filio patrique timeat. So this is talking about Aeneas. So now every breeze is terrifying Aeneas. Every sound is terrifying Aeneas. When or since he is equally afraid for his son and for his father. So a couple of features here. One, we have a cum clause, cum timeat, and you see the subjunctive here from timera. The regular indicative of timera would be timet, he fears, but here we have timeat, since he fears. What kind of a cum clause is this? This is an example of a cum causal, because we're saying because he equally fears for his son and his father. The other feature here is we have the dative with timera. Normally, when you fear something, the thing you fear is in the accusative. He fears his son would be timet filium. But you can also use fear in the sense of being afraid for someone else, that harm could come to someone else. In that case, you use the dative as you find here with filio and patrique. And then in line 249, we have, start with cum anchises per umbram prospiciens fuge mi fili exclamat, hostes apropinquant. And so we have exclamat here, when Anchises, looking out through the darkness or the shadows, shouts, but we would say shouted. It's another example of a historic kind of a present. Also, notice that we have it in a cum clause. So what kind of a cum clause do we have here? This is another example of a cum adversative clause, because here, and we'll read the beginning of the sentence, now they're approaching the gates, and they seemed to be safe, salviese, when, and so here we have the change of fortune. When suddenly, we might say, when suddenly, Anchises, looking out through the darkness, shouted, "Run away, my son!" So here, a cum adversative clause, which is why we don't have a subjunctive with exclamat, we have just a regular indicative. And the last feature in line 269, we have another example of phos, that indeclinable neuter noun, meaning religiously right or right. So non sine numina deorum haec eveniunt, nec phos est te hinc comitem portare creiusam rex Olympi, hoc non sinit. So not without the will of the gods did these things didn't happen without the will of the gods, nor is it right for you or permitted for you to carry Creusa as a companion from here. The king of Olympus is not going to allow this. So here we have phos, meaning permitted or religiously allowed again. So those are all of our new features for chapter 37. Thanks for listening.